Who let him cry like that? The voice cut through the stillness of the house like a blade. Deep, sharp, furious. Ethan Montgomery's footsteps echoed down the grand marble staircase of his Aspen estate, each step heavier than the last. Outside, snow drifted quietly across the pine-covered hills. But inside, it was anything but quiet. The cry had started moments earlier. High-pitched, rhythmic, piercing. Not the cry of a child who'd scraped a knee. No, this was different. This was panic. This was the kind of sound that clawed its way into your spine. The kind that made even the staff freeze mid-step, unsure whether to rush toward it or run the other way. And that's exactly what Jasmine Porter did. Freeze. She was standing in the hallway with a warm rag in one hand and a spray bottle in the other, halfway through wiping down the baseboards of the guest suite. It was her 4th day working in the Montgomery mansion. Part-time cleaner, full-time invisible. She wasn't supposed to be upstairs. Especially not on the West Wing. The staff had warned her. That part of the house was off-limits. Unspoken rule. But that sound, that awful sound, it dragged something out of her chest she hadn't felt in years. A memory. A moment. Her little brother Caleb, rocking in a corner, humming through his tears, while no one in the foster house knew what to do with him. Jasmine dropped the cloth. No hesitation. She climbed the second set of stairs, heart hammering in her chest, her sneakers nearly silent on the polished floor. She passed the library, the study, and finally stopped in front of a door that was cracked just an inch. Through that sliver of space, she saw a boy, maybe 6, 7 years old, curled into himself on the floor, banging his forehead against the edge of a beanbag chair. Lights from a ceiling projector shimmered across the walls like stars. But nothing about the room felt magical. It felt like a storm. She stepped inside, slowly, carefully, and whispered, "Hey, sweetheart, I'm just gonna sit right here. I'm not gonna touch you, okay?" Then the door behind her slammed open. "What the hell are you doing in here?" It was him, Ethan Montgomery, and the house, once frozen in fear, was about to catch fire. Ethan Montgomery stood tall in the doorway, a 6'2" wall of pressed wool and fury. His tailored charcoal suit hadn't even wrinkled from the chaos. His blue eyes were narrowed, sharp, unforgiving. One hand still gripped his phone, the other, clenched into a fist at his side. "What the hell are you doing in this room?" he snapped again. Jasmine Porter turned, instinctively standing between him and the boy. Not in defiance, just protection. Her voice was steady, calm but firm. "I heard him crying, sir. I didn't see anyone come check on him. You're not supposed to be on this floor." "I know," she replied, "but I've seen this before. He was hurting." Ethan stepped forward, towering over her. "I have professionals for this. Therapists. A full-time care team. You are not one of them." "No," she said simply. "I'm just the maid who couldn't ignore a child screaming like that." Behind her, the little boy, Noah, had stopped banging his head. His arms now wrapped around his knees, rocking gently. His face was red, damp, but his sobs had quieted to soft hiccups. Ethan noticed, and for a second, just a second, something flickered in his expression. Doubt maybe, or something he hadn't felt in a while. Helplessness. "I'm sorry," Jasmine said again, "but I wasn't going to walk past a child in distress. My brother was autistic. Non-verbal. He used to cry like that. I know what it means." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at Noah, then at Jasmine, then back again. When he stepped closer to his son and tried to lift him, Noah recoiled, screamed, kicked, flailed in a panic so sudden, so fierce, it nearly knocked Ethan off balance. "Noah," he whispered, startled, arms frozen mid-reach. But Jasmine, she didn't say a word. She just stepped forward, knelt slowly in front of the boy, and opened her palms. "Visible. Come." Noah turned toward her, not all the way, but enough. And then, to Ethan's utter disbelief, the boy crawled across the carpet and collapsed against her. Quiet, breathing heavy, but no longer screaming. Just there, held. Ethan stared. This stranger, this housemaid, this woman he barely remembered hiring, was holding his son like it was the most natural thing in the world. And he hated that he didn't know why. Long before Jasmine Porter ever stepped foot inside the Montgomery estate, her life was already shaped by silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that screamed between thin apartment walls in the Bronx. The kind that fell after long nights of unanswered questions, after the sound of a young boy crying under a worn SpongeBob blanket stopped echoing through their tiny two-bedroom. Her brother, Caleb, was diagnosed with nonverbal autism when he was 3. Jasmine had just turned 12. Her mother worked 2 jobs and slept in shifts. Her father had left before Caleb could form a word. So most days, it was just the 2 of them, Jasmine and Caleb, navigating a world that didn't know how to listen. She learned quickly how to read his breathing, how to anticipate a meltdown before it started, how to sit quietly in a corner and rock back and forth with him for 45 minutes until his heartbeat slowed. She learned to speak in gestures when words didn't work, and when even gestures failed, she just sat beside him and waited, because sometimes presence says what language cannot. But childhood doesn't last forever, not even the hard ones. At 19, Jasmine had to drop out of community college when her mom was diagnosed with lupus. Bills piled up. The part-time job at the diner wasn't enough, so she juggled night shifts, late-night caregiving, and early morning bus rides to whatever job paid cash. And then Caleb got sick. A sudden, brutal infection. Doctors said it was meningitis, complicated by a seizure. He passed within 48 hours. Jasmine never heard him speak a word. Not once. But in those final moments, she remembered how he reached for her hand, pressed his fingers against her palm the same way he did when he wanted her to know he was okay. It was the quietest goodbye she'd ever received. After Caleb died, the apartment felt heavier. Her mother's health declined. Jasmine worked more hours, took on private cleaning jobs, anything to avoid that suffocating silence. When a cleaning agency in Colorado posted a high-paying short-term live-in position, she applied, not because she wanted to clean some billionaire's windows, but because she needed to breathe somewhere new. Aspen, Colorado felt like another planet. Pine trees, fresh air, silence, but not the kind that haunted her. A quieter quiet. And now, in this stranger's home, she was watching a little boy curl into her lap, just like Caleb used to. Same tremble, same breath, and maybe, just maybe, she thought, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after the hallway incident, the house was quieter than usual. Not in the usual cold, museum-like way, but a little tense. Like everyone was waiting to see what Ethan Montgomery would do next. Jasmine had returned to her usual duties, wiping down the kitchen counters, folding linen napkins, refilling fruit in the glass bowl no one ever ate from. She hadn't seen Noah. She hadn't seen Ethan either. Until Mrs. Lane, the house manager, found her in the pantry. "Mr. Montgomery would like to see you," she said, keeping her voice flat, almost rehearsed. "In the West Wing." Jasmine wiped her hands on her apron and followed the marble hallway to a room she'd never been invited into before. A private study, lined with dark walnut bookshelves and heavy drapes that kept the morning sun out. Ethan stood near the fireplace, hands in his pockets, eyes somewhere far away. "I'm not firing you," he said before she could even speak. She blinked, surprised. "Okay." I've never seen Noah react like that. To anyone. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Would you be willing to spend more time with him? Just a few hours a day. Structured play. Supervised. I'd pay you double your rate." Jasmine hesitated. She hadn't come here for anything more than a paycheck. But something about that boy, the way he melted into her arms like he'd been waiting for her, had shifted something in her. "I'll try," she said. That afternoon, she entered Noah's room again. Same projector still cast stars across the walls. Same soft carpet, same quiet. Noah sat near the window, knees pulled to his chest, watching the snow fall. Jasmine didn't approach right away. She sat cross-legged across the room, giving him space. "I brought something," she said, holding up a tiny handheld kaleidoscope, the kind that shimmered light into geometric colors when you turned it. She rolled it gently across the floor toward him. Noah didn't move at first, but after a few seconds, he reached out, picked it up, held it to the light, then turned the dial. Colors danced inside. He tilted his head. And for the first time, Jasmine saw the hint of a smile. It was barely there, a flicker, but it was real. The next day, she brought a soft scarf, tied to a small stick, and waved it gently like a ribbon through the air. Noah followed it with his eyes. The day after that, he passed her a puzzle piece when she struggled to find the right fit. Tiny gestures. Silent trust. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. But it was something rare. The beginning of a bond. Built not on words, but presence. And somewhere in the hall outside, Ethan stood watching through a cracked door. He didn't say anything. But for the first time in years, he exhaled without clenching his fists. 3 days later, Ethan asked to see her again. It was evening, the kind of Colorado dusk where the light stretched long and golden across the snow-covered hills. The house felt almost peaceful. Almost. Jasmine had just finished organizing the lower pantry when Mrs. Lane appeared again, this time with a curious look in her eyes. "He's waiting for you," she said. "In the study." Jasmine wiped her hands, smoothed her shirt, and made her way down the hallway. Her boots tapped softly against the hardwood floors. She wasn't nervous exactly, but something about being summoned twice in 1 week by a man like Ethan Montgomery made her chest tighten. When she entered, the study was dim, lit only by a reading lamp and the fading blue outside the tall windows. Ethan stood near his desk, sleeves rolled up, no tie. A glass of untouched bourbon sat on the edge of the oak. "Have a seat," he said. She sat. He stayed standing. "I've been watching you," he started. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, just slightly. He caught himself. I've been observing. The way you interact with Noah. The way he responds to you." She waited. Ethan exhaled. No therapist. No specialist. No trained professional has ever gotten through to him like that. "He trusts you. I don't know how or why, but he does." Still, she said nothing. "I want to make this official," he continued. "Not just a few hours a day. I want to offer you a full-time position, developmental support, live-in if you're willing, your own suite in the staff wing, weekends off, health benefits, and compensation well above your current rate." Jasmine blinked. "That's generous," she said slowly. "It's necessary," he replied. "I don't want someone else with credentials. I want the person who made my son smile again." She hesitated. Her grandmother's medications were piling up back home. The bills. The uncertainty. But she also knew what it meant to stay, to be part of something this fragile. This real. "You sure about this?" she asked. He nodded. "I don't make personal decisions lightly." Jasmine leaned back slightly in the chair. "I'll try," she said. "But he comes first. Always." Ethan cracked the faintest smile. "Agreed." In that quiet room, surrounded by old books and second chances, something unspoken passed between them. Not a contract, not yet, but a promise. The following weeks moved with a rhythm Jasmine hadn't expected. Gentle, steady, real. Mornings began with sunlight cutting through the tall windows of the nursery, warming the space where Jasmine and Noah sat on the floor surrounded by soft puzzles, blocks, and weighted blankets. They didn't speak, not with words, but they talked constantly in their own language. Glances, signs, patterns, patience. Noah started seeking her out. When she entered the room, he looked for her. When he became overstimulated, her presence calmed him. When he was content, he'd hum softly as he lined up blocks in perfect color-coded rows. She never rushed him, never forced eye contact, never pushed for progress. And somehow, that was what unlocked everything. Ethan noticed. He started spending more time at home, lingering in the hallway longer, watching through half-open doors. Once, Jasmine caught him watching as she signed the word for safe, and Noah nodded, slow, deliberate, and placed his hand over hers. Their eyes met across the room. No words were exchanged, but something warm passed between them. One night, Jasmine came downstairs to make tea and found Ethan already in the kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled up, barefoot, stirring a pot of homemade chili like he didn't own one of the most powerful companies in the country. "I used to cook all the time," he said, breaking the silence. "Before, everything changed." She nodded. "Smells like someone still remembers how." They talked, softly. Nothing too personal. Weather. Food. How Noah used to love riding the train with his mom. But there was something easy about it. Something human. It didn't feel like employer and employee anymore. It felt like two people on the same page, even if they were still reading different chapters. But peace has a way of being interrupted. It started with a comment, subtle, sharp, by Constance, one of the long-time staff members. "I see you've made yourself quite at home," she said one morning, passing Jasmine in the hall with a folded towel in her arms. "Must be nice, going from cleaning baseboards to bonding with the boss's kid." Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't need to. But the tone lingered. Whispers started to travel through the staff wing. Some rolled their eyes when Jasmine walked in the room. One housemaid abruptly stopped talking when Jasmine entered the laundry room. It didn't take long for Ethan to notice. He called a meeting with senior staff. Made it clear that Jasmine's role was protected, valued, and permanent. But damage, once planted, takes root. And then came the real blow. One afternoon, a new private nurse, temporary, covering for the weekend, insisted Noah wear a stiff, scratchy sweater as part of his desensitization protocol. The reaction was immediate. Noah screamed, slammed his fists, collapsed in a corner, sobbing and shaking. Jasmine rushed in, unpeeled the sweater, held him close. But by the time Ethan arrived, all he saw was his son trembling in Jasmine's arms. His voice was sharp. Too sharp. "What happened? What did you do?" Jasmine's chest tightened. It wasn't the question that hurt. It was that he asked it at all. That evening the house was still, but not peaceful. Jasmine stood at the window of her room, watching the snow fall in heavy flakes over the pine trees. Her mug of tea had gone cold in her hands. She kept replaying Ethan's voice in her head. "What did you do?" Not "what happened?" Not "is Noah okay?" But a question drenched in assumption. She knew that tone. She'd heard it before. In stores, on sidewalks, in jobs that paid her less than she deserved. The way it dripped with unspoken doubt. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was disappointed. A soft knock came at the door. She didn't move. It came again. Finally, she opened it. Ethan stood there, tie gone, sleeves rolled up, hair messier than usual. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood in the hallway like he didn't know how to be in his own house. "I was out of line," he said finally. Jasmine crossed her arms. "Yeah," she said quietly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Can I talk to you?" She stepped aside. He entered, hesitated by the desk, then sat in the chair near the small window. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then he spoke. "When Emily got pregnant, we were terrified." He looked up at her. She had a heart condition. A rare one. The doctors warned us. Said carrying to term could be dangerous. But she wanted Noah. She wanted him so badly. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded. "She made me promise," he continued, "that no matter what happened, I would be there for him. That I wouldn't disappear into work or fear. That I would love him completely. Unconditionally." He paused. "When she went into labor early, we rushed to the hospital. Complications hit fast. She died holding my hand." His voice cracked then, barely, but it did. "And after that, I don't know. I think I broke. I hired help. I built walls. I told myself I was doing the right thing, giving Noah structure, resources, the best care money could buy." He looked at Jasmine. "But I wasn't present. Not really. I didn't know how." She swallowed, her voice low. "You don't have to know everything to be what he needs." He nodded slowly. "I see how he is with you. I've never seen him so calm. I think part of me resented it. Resented that you could give him what I couldn't. That's not what this is," she said gently. "It's not about who gets through. It's about making sure he never feels alone." Ethan leaned back in the chair, his shoulders finally relaxing. "I'm trying," he said. She nodded once. "That's more than enough to start." And in the silence that followed, something shifted. Not fixed, not finished, but open. and finally honest. It started with a headline. A clickbait article posted late on a Friday night. Billionaire CEO's housemaid becomes son's live-in nanny. Inside the Montgomery mansion mystery. By Saturday morning, it had gone viral. Photos of Jasmine, blurry ones, taken from a distance as she stepped out to get the mail or walked Noah through the snowy garden, were plastered all over entertainment blogs and online gossip forums. Speculation poured in like wildfire. She's after his money. Where's the child's real therapist? She's playing him. And just like that, the truth got buried under 1,000 assumptions. Jasmine found out when Mrs. Lane handed her an iPad with trembling hands. "I didn't know whether to show you," she whispered. "But I figured it was better if you heard it from us first." Jasmine stared at the screen. Her stomach sank. She scrolled. She kept scrolling. The comment sections were the worst. People dissecting her skin tone, her posture, her smile. Words like opportunist, unqualified, and maid turned gold digger floated across the feed like poison. Ethan found her in the study later that afternoon. She didn't look up when he walked in. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is my fault." She shook her head slowly. "No, it's not. This is how the world works. I've lived it." He clenched his jaw. "I'll get my PR team on it. I'll shut it down." "You can't shut down hate, Ethan. You can only outlive it." That Monday morning, it got worse. 2 black SUVs with government plates pulled up to the estate. Jasmine watched from the second-floor landing as 3 well-dressed individuals exited the cars, briefcases in hand. One of them showed a badge to Mrs. Lane at the door. Child Protective Services. An anonymous report had been filed, alleging neglect and unfit caregiving practices at the Montgomery residence. Ethan met them in the foyer, suit crisp, voice low but forceful. "My son is not neglected," he said through gritted teeth. "He is protected. You're welcome to look, but you will do so respectfully and under observation." Jasmine was asked to step aside. Not fired, but removed, from the nursery, from Noah, from everything that mattered. She sat in her room, staring at the pale blue walls, listening to strangers comb through closets, observe the kitchen, photograph toy bins. She wasn't scared. She was furious. Downstairs, one of the agents interviewed Ethan while another requested to speak to Noah alone. When Ethan declined, citing his son's neurological condition, the request was noted, but not pushed. The final insult came when one of the agents knocked gently on Jasmine's door. "Miss Porter," the woman said softly, "I understand this is difficult, but we do need to ask you a few questions." Jasmine nodded, stood tall, and invited her in. She answered every question clearly, calmly, truthfully. Yes, she had previous experience with children on the spectrum. No, she was not trained by an institution. Yes, she had been working closely with Ethan's son. No, she had never been left alone overnight. Yes, she cared deeply for the boy. When the agents finally left, they didn't say much. Just a polite professional, "We'll be in touch." But the damage had already rippled through the house. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was wounded, and Jasmine could feel it like a bruise beneath her skin. The courthouse smelled like old wood and cold air. Jasmine had never been in a courtroom before. Not like this. Not as the center of it all. She sat at the defense table next to Ethan, wearing a navy blue blazer she borrowed from Mrs. Lane and the same braided bun she always wore when she needed to feel in control. Across from them sat the legal team representing the anonymous whistleblower, though everyone knew who it was by now. A disgruntled former staffer with ties to a rival tech firm. Someone who had always watched Jasmine with narrowed eyes and thin-lipped disapproval. Ethan had spared no expense. His lawyer, Veronica Hale, was one of the sharpest attorneys on the West Coast. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She lived for moments like this. But Jasmine? Jasmine just wanted to breathe. The judge, a tall black woman named Ruth Alston, called the room to order. "Today's hearing," she said, voice firm but fair, "concerns allegations of misconduct and unfit caregiving at the Montgomery residence. Both sides will have the opportunity to present evidence and testimony. Let's proceed." The opposing attorney went first, painting Jasmine as unqualified, suspiciously close, and potentially manipulative. They flashed photos of her walking through the snow with Noah. They questioned why someone without a formal degree was allowed such access to the child of a billionaire. They called her presence unprofessional. And then it was Jasmine's turn. Veronica stood and said, "We'd like Miss Porter to testify on her own behalf." Jasmine walked to the witness stand, knees steady, hands folded. The courtroom waited. She took a breath. "My name is Jasmine Porter. I was hired to clean floors, fold sheets, and stay invisible. That's what people like me are usually paid to do." A pause. But 4 days into the job, I heard a child crying upstairs. It wasn't just a tantrum. It was the kind of cry that lives in your spine. And I knew that sound because I'd grown up with it. She looked out across the courtroom, her voice steady. My younger brother, Caleb, was nonverbal autistic. We didn't have much growing up. No private therapies, no sensory rooms. Just me, a 12-year-old girl with a library card and a whole lot of love. Her eyes softened. When I saw Noah rocking and hitting his head, I didn't think about job descriptions. I thought about the little boy who used to do the same thing under our kitchen table. I thought about what would have happened if no one had shown up for him. Jasmine's voice cracked. Just a little. I didn't manipulate that child. I didn't infiltrate this home. I did what any human being should have done. I stayed. I listened. And I made sure he didn't feel alone. The courtroom fell quiet. Judge Alston sat back in her chair, arms folded, expression unreadable. Then she said, "Miss Porter, thank you. You may step down." Jasmine returned to her seat beside Ethan. His hand found hers under the table. Warm, firm, and for the first time since the chaos began, she felt something that had been missing for weeks. Clarity. No matter what they said, she had told the truth, and the truth had weight. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the kind of silence that felt cold or heavy. It was peaceful. The court had ruled in their favor. The allegations dismissed. The noise, the press, the chaos, it all seemed to melt away in the soft hum of a snowy evening. Jasmine was in the nursery with Noah, gently humming an old gospel tune as she helped him line up his favorite blue blocks. He was calm, focused. His little fingers moved with purpose, stacking and sorting by color, then shape, then size. Ethan stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms folded. He didn't say a word. He just watched them, watched his son exist in stillness, watched Jasmine bring that stillness to life. She started signing again. Safe. Love. More. Noah glanced up. Then something changed. He looked at Ethan, then at Jasmine, and softly, barely louder than a whisper, he opened his mouth. "Ma!" Jasmine froze. Her hand trembled in midair. Noah looked down at the block in his hand, then up again. "Mama!" It was clear, soft, imperfect, but real. Ethan's breath caught. He stepped into the room like the floor might give way beneath him. "Noah!" he said, kneeling. The boy didn't flinch. Instead, he reached out, placed his tiny hand on his father's chest, and repeated it again, this time slower, like he knew what it meant. "Mama!" Jasmine covered her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. He wasn't confused. He wasn't calling her his mother. He was remembering. He was grieving. He was trying. Ethan wrapped his arms around his son, pulling him close, his voice shaking as he whispered, "You remembered her. You said it." And behind them, Jasmine didn't interrupt. She just sat quietly on the rug, heart full, eyes glassy, witnessing something no therapy, no expert, no article could explain. It wasn't a breakthrough. It was a miracle, and it sounded like healing. Spring came quietly to Aspen. The snow gave way to soft ground. Pines stayed green, but wildflowers started blooming in patches along the back garden. The sun hung a little longer in the sky. The air no longer carried the weight of survival. It hummed with something new. Oh, Jasmine had moved into the East Wing full-time now, not just as a caregiver, but as someone essential to the rhythm of the house. She wasn't just showing up for Noah anymore. She was building something, with him, for him, around him. Every morning began the same, warm pancakes, soft jazz on the kitchen speaker, and Noah sitting cross-legged at the kitchen island, watching Jasmine with quiet trust. He still didn't speak often, but his eyes told stories now. His fingers signed more confidently. He smiled more. Ethan started joining them at breakfast. Sometimes in a t-shirt and jeans, sometimes still half-tied in a suit. But he was there. Really there. Not as a CEO managing a crisis, but as a father, learning the language of his son one small, sacred gesture at a time. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep curled up in a sunbeam beside his toy train set, Ethan found Jasmine in the garden. She was sitting on the bench under the budding cherry tree, sipping tea from her favorite mug, the one with chipped edges and the word "breathe" hand-painted across the front. He sat beside her without asking. For a while, they didn't talk. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. Finally, he spoke. "You ever think about doing this on a bigger scale?" She looked over, eyebrows raised. "Doing what?" "What you've done with Noah. Teaching, guiding, listening, leading. There are so many kids who never get someone like you." Jasmine looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I think I was put here for more than just surviving." Ethan nodded. "What if we built something together?" She blinked. "Like what?" "A center. A foundation. For families who can't afford care. For kids like Noah. For girls like you, who know how to love quietly and show up loud." She smiled slowly, the idea curling around her like warmth. "Would you really do that?" "I would," he said. "With you." And there it was. Not a proposal. Not some grand confession of love under candlelight. But a real invitation. To purpose, to partnership, to something that felt like home. Later that month, Jasmine was invited to speak at a local autism awareness event. She stood on a small stage in a middle school gym, surrounded by folding chairs and string lights. Her voice was clear. Steady. "I didn't go to college for this. I don't have a fancy title. But I know what it means to be seen. And I know what it means to show up for someone when the world refuses to." She didn't cry when they gave her a standing ovation. But Ethan did, quietly from the third row, with Noah on his lap, gently signing safe into his father's hand. And that night, back at the Montgomery estate, Jasmine didn't feel like a visitor anymore. She felt like she belonged. Not because she had earned it, but because she had become it. Summer settled gently over the valley. The Montgomery estate, once a fortress of silence and sharp corners, had softened. The halls echoed not with tension, but with laughter, occasional, small, precious. The kind of laughter that had to be earned. Noah was outside more now, his hands always full of something. Twigs, toy trains, smooth stones he called friend rocks. He still didn't speak much, but his eyes met yours more often. His presence no longer curled in defense. He lived outward now, even if only in inches. One evening, Jasmine stood alone in the nursery, the windows opened to a golden pink sky. She watched the curtains dance in the breeze, heard the gentle hum of cicadas in the distance, and smiled. On the floor beside the window sat a framed picture, a new one. It was taken the week before, at the soft launch of the Montgomery Porter Foundation. In it, Ethan stood with his arm loosely around Jasmine's shoulders. Noah stood in front of them, holding both their hands. His smile was lopsided and real. In permanent marker, Noah had signed his name at the bottom, a wobbly N, a crooked O, a backwards A, and the H slightly off-center. It was perfect. Later that night, Jasmine sat at the piano bench in the main hallway, the one Emma used to play. She didn't know how to play much, just a lullaby her grandmother once hummed while stirring cornbread batter. She let her fingers tap out the melody, slow and uneven. Ethan approached quietly, placing a mug of chamomile beside her. "You never told me you could play," he said softly. "I can't," she smiled. "But it calms him." He nodded, sliding onto the bench beside her. Their shoulders touched. No words were needed. Jasmine looked down at her hands. "I used to think love had to be loud, that it needed grand gestures, big moments, sweeping speeches." She paused, then added, "But I've learned it's quieter than that. Sometimes love is showing up on a Tuesday, or learning someone's silence, or holding space for someone else's grief until they can carry it themselves." Ethan looked at her. "You changed everything," he whispered. And not just for him. She looked up, and for once, didn't deflect. I didn't fix anyone, she said. I just stayed. Voiceover fade out. In a world so obsessed with fixing, with performing, with rushing toward results, sometimes the most radical thing we can do is stay. Stay long enough to see past the surface. Stay still enough to listen. Stay soft enough to be felt. Because some people don't need saving. They just need someone to choose them, and not leave. In the final scene, Noah runs across the lawn with a pinwheel in his hand. The sun is setting behind him. Jasmine watches from the porch, hand resting over her heart. Ethan joins her. They don't say anything. They don't need to. Because sometimes, family isn't built in blood or biology. It's built in moments. Moments like this one. Quiet. Steady. True. Fade to black. And